Okay, I think we're back. It's time for us to go live again. It's Wednesday, and we're planning to go live every Wednesday. And next week, we're planning to have a dear friend of ours, Pastor Ebenezer. He's from Nigeria, and he'll be coming to talk about the historical Jesus. So today we are going to be focusing on the historical Jesus. We're going to be looking at a video from King Somnala, a very controversial character, and he's going to be also joined by Uj Israel, who's also another controversial character. So today you're going to get a double, I should call it a double portion of controversy. But yeah, it's exciting. I've got Chris here with me again, and so we're partnering up every Wednesday. We'll call it Wednesday Night Live with Chris and Luandiso. But Chris, if you want to just send some greetings there.
Yeah, Arno, thank you very much for joining us once more again. And yeah, I think we need to begin to make this sort of like a culture where we think within the system, which is what we do on a weekly basis. So, yeah, no, welcome and enjoy. And yeah, we'll take it from there.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we're going to go straight into our video. It's not a very long video, but as usual, we'll stop when we need to stop and give some commentary as well. So yeah, we're hoping that the Holy Spirit will bring to our remembrance everything that we know about the historical Jesus today. So we welcome you, and so yeah, let's go straight into our video.
Do you believe in Jesus?
No.
You don't believe in the existence of Christ?
No.
I would love to know why.
I cannot believe on something that cannot be proven.
We can't prove the existence of God.
We can.
We can't.
Let me tell you how you prove something. Now, there's a different knowledge, knowing and belief. When you know, that's become a science. It's a scientific word. What is a science? Knowledge gained by observation, proven by experiment. Make an example. If I say, God, I'm praying, I'm talking to him. I can't move this for me. If God speaks to me and say, okay, take this bottle of water, help people, and I've helped him. That's my what? Evidence. I can prove, for example, this water can kick out every spirit on the person. Yes, it's proven. How is proven? By sprinkling on the person. But the people who have drink water. When I was fighting with the government, the issue was there were evidence, medical certificate that say the person was positive and now is negative. That goes down on record as a proof, as an evidence. You cannot sue me because I have evidence. That's what I mean when I say I can prove the existence. When it comes.
So I just want you to pay attention to the standard that he sets for himself as evidence, right? So he's not going to require the same thing of Christianity and the same thing of Jesus. So, and for me, just straight away when he's talking about, the government and the government verifying what he's saying, how many Christians with testimonies, who were sick before, who are now, well, and so on. I mean, I can think of one famous Christian leader who laid in hospital. The doctors confirmed he was sick. And, Jesus healed him and called him into ministry as well. And so for me, it's, it's a very subjective approach that he's setting up for himself. But when he's coming to Christianity, just listen to what he's going to say.
To Jesus, you are talking a physical being. Number one, was born as what? As a Jew.
Or as King of the Jews.
He was born in Israel.
Yes.
There is a family, okay, that you need to trust.
Yes.
If you're going to prove somebody's existence, you're going to need the source direct from the person. What did he say about himself? And then when you find out what he said, you need to verify the information that tells you I existed. Now, to verify the information will mean this one says I was born, and you say I was born, the two of you. Okay. Now, if the two of you says I was born, and the other one says something else, and the other one about my birth, there is what? Contradiction. Meaning you are not saying the same thing. If I take that into court, in court, nobody can say Jesus from David. But in the Bible, because in my view, the information of the Bible to prove the existence of God, I will not allow anyone to debate with me, because you need more than the direct information from the Bible. You need other sources that prove.
Did you see that little shift there? He's very smart, this guy, you know. For him, it's just that report from the government. There's no other sources that are required, right? See the standard that is being set out here. For Jesus, multiple sources are needed. But for him, it's what he says and what his congregation is saying. So just pay attention to those things as well, because when he draws the conclusion, you know, he'll make a conclusion based on, you know, false standards that have been laid out.
Sure. And then I think
was Jesus born on earth? Did Jesus die? And were people resurrected when he died? That's a question I should ask to prove the whole existence, or to take the story of Jesus as true. Number one, I'll find a problem to locate the announcement where people were to be censored in the history. I go to the same year, I go to the same empire was reigning. There's no record, but it says it was announced the whole world. Number two, when it comes to...
Do you want to just jump into... I just don't want us to drift too much without responding to some of these things, but I don't know if you want to jump into the empire, but for me, I'm still interested in the logic there, you know. So there's usually a statement I like to make that, you know, the absence of evidence is not evidence for absence. That would be arguing from silence, you know. It's like saying, you know, a certain person in history, there's no writing about him having children, and therefore he didn't have children. That you can't really make that, you know, that conclusion, you know, out of no evidence. You know, you can say maybe the information is missing or it was lost, but you can't necessarily make the claim that I can't see any evidence for it, therefore it never happened. You know, you have to come with evidence that actually prove that it never happened. You see, he still has some work to do in proving that. What's your take on the census that he says, you know, was not there?
Actually, this is, for me, this is, I'm looking at this and I'm laughing alone. I'm thinking, so hypocritical, you know, and he's not consistent on what he's saying. He says this and then expects the other on the other side. First of all, there's, for the Bible, for us, it's evidential for the historical figure of Jesus Christ. And we still do have other sources on the other side that do mention the existence of Jesus Christ. So for him just to say that the Bible is contradicting, and if it's contradicting, those contradictions, you realize they're not even contradiction. And they are complementary to one another. So this is so hypocritical. And I would expect someone with his caliber to have done his research, you know, to have this audacity to stand in front of the people and express your and to display
your opinions.
It's really, you know, it's really disappointing for me to look at this. But yeah, let's continue.
Okay, sure.
There is a big event that should be recorded, that everyone, Abraham, they were resurrected, walked on the city. They were seen by everybody. Only the Bible gave us that recording, not the history. While in those days, what happened, it was recorded in the history. Take another example. As researchers, that's where we find problems. I'm just mentioning the few. When it comes to Moses leaving Egypt, it's difficult on the record of Egypt recording soldiers who drowned on the water and 3 million leaving Egypt, let alone counting from the time where Joseph and his family came as 70 people, how short it is, and then going to 3 million. Those are my.
What does Moses have to do with the existence of Jesus? That's just, the question is, do you believe in the existence of Jesus? Yeah. But see, there's no evidence for Moses, therefore Jesus. Where is that logic coming from?
I think he's just trying to fetch everything far off and
thinking-
just make his case.
Yeah.
Out of the box issues about Jesus Christ. So I came to the conclusion, I cannot believe what I've examined and not find any evidence of it.
Okay.
Another one was that Jesus prayed for the unity of what?
Of the church.
Of the church.
Yeah.
You yourself, you just told me that, and you and I will know the things that are taking place in the church.
Including yourself.
In one denomination, there are more split alone. And you take Methodists, there will be free Methodists, but I know what you're going to say. You say, not a true church, and they will say to you, not a true church. That alone is a challenge for me. If Jesus prayed for those who believe in him, and all of them claim to believe, and they consider each other as a wrong doctrine. For example, if I was believing in Christ and you were believing in Christ, we will still differ. Come the doctrine of his birth, come the doctrine of his death, come the issue of Passover, we will differ. No wonder, because it is the Bible itself like this. For example, Matthew 1:16, according to that verse, who is the grandfather of Jesus? Jacob, your name.
Jacob. Jacob.
According to Luke, who is the father?
Heli.
Which one do we believe, you and I? I'm just asking. Which one do we believe? Let's take that to.
I'm just fascinated at J Israel. He's agreeing there.
Exactly. These people even bother about to make a research to try to find out what are all this. I mean, it's straightforward. It tells you that the genealogy that they're talking about in the book of Matthew, it's more about the genealogy of Jacob, literally on the lineage of Jacob, and trying to show that he's from the lineage of King David. And when you look at the other side of Luke, chapter 3, it shows you the genealogy of Mary, but within the customs, it was not regarded to say that the woman will take the head. So they had to some way to follow the customs and put in Jacob as sort of like the head, but they were going through the lineage of Mary. And that is the difference. That's why they are not the same. It's not a contradiction. It's just that Luke is focusing on the lineage of Mary, and then Matthew is focusing on the lineage of Jacob. How is that a contradiction? I believe it's complementary to one another. So that cannot be a contradiction of any sort.
And the view that I take, on that, because I think people are always, if you're looking, for a problem, and you're probably going to find the problem.
Definitely.
And I think that there's never going to be enough evidence for people who don't want to believe. So for me, when I look at that passage, if you look at the grandfather of Joseph, so just if he's saying Jacob, and then on the other side it's Heli, both of them have the same father. So this means these two people were brothers, right? According to me, and I think a lot of the church fathers take this view, is that these two were brothers. And I think that the Jewish custom is very similar to the African custom. So if Jacob was, let's say, the firstborn son, and Heli was the second son, and Jacob dies without having any children, so according to the custom, Heli actually will have to marry the wife of Jacob. So which would then mean it's right to say that the grandfather of Jesus is actually Heli in terms of biologically. But at the same time, if we follow the fact that the other side, like Matthew is sort of following the line of David, and then on the other side with Luke, he's taking it all the way from Adam and then he's bringing it all this way. You'll see that Matthew doesn't record, he doesn't record Adam. He starts with David because he's writing to Jews. And so he's making a case for Jesus being the Messiah, but to Jews. And so this is, for me, why it's important for him to say, actually, it's Jacob, even though he's not the biological father of Joseph, but we have to record them in order, to keep that line. But at the same time, this is the real father. So for me, I just think that, it's the same person, and these are two brothers. One probably didn't have a son, and this one had the son and married his brother's wife. Pretty much, that's my view on it.
No, I feel you. So, but then you see it's not a contradiction. It's
No.
two lineages from two different families, so it cannot be contradicting.
Absolutely.
Because it's it's not like they are mixing names and so on. Literally two different types of genealogies over here. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, and that's why I'm saying, if you're looking for a problem and you only look at the problem from one side, and you don't do your own sort of open-minded research, a lot of the times people think that, the information that they're bringing out about Christianity is new, but it's actually not. And in fact, a lot of the times, the people that come up with criticisms for Christianity are actually white people. It's white scholars, mostly liberal scholars. I know there's this institution called the Jesus College, and already in the 90s they were already questioning and criticizing these genealogies. And at that time Bishop Maponga was probably still speaking in tongues, and Somnala was still proclaiming Christ, and so on. But it's the fact that it is now trending, to criticize Christianity, and therefore people jump on that bandwagon, and so and you also want to be the one that brings this information as if it's new, as if you've done research about it, but you probably just looked at a video or you took a conspiracy from someone else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's continue.
God. Let's say these people all come back to life. Okay, they are claiming Christ to be their grandson.
Okay.
Who will win the case?
None of them.
Which is true.
Yeah.
None of them. To believe in Jesus Christ, it is because of the fear, it is because of the strategy of the white people. Not only I doubt Jesus Christ, especially the New Testament, I feel it was orchestrated to colonize our people, looking into a time when it was
it there?
written.
Hey, I was checking the study the other day, and they stated that the New Testament actually has around 5,800, almost to 6,000 manuscripts that are there and reliable. You look at the likes of Caesar and all the historical people that you can think about, you realize that they actually have like less than 10, most of them, less than 10 manuscripts. And yet within the New Testament, we have almost 6,000 manuscripts that are there. Some are partially in good condition, some are partially damaged, but people can be able to read them. That's why we have the confidence to hold the Bible, to say that when we look at the New Testament manuscripts and what it is written today within our Bible, scholars will tell you there is the errors that are there are very minor. We are talking about commas, we are talking about exclamation marks, and so on. And the New Testament is the most concept on the most historical document that has the most manuscripts than anything that anyone can.
Absolutely.
So for him to say such a thing, it shows you that he didn't really do research on what he's talking about. He didn't really look deep into what he's looking at. And as you did state that when someone really is looking for something, they will definitely find it the way they are looking for it.
Absolutely.
And in this case, I believe that you need to take a multifaceted approach to things before you only take a final decision and make yourself look that, I'm sorry to say stupid, but to make yourself look that stupid. Public platform, you're making it hard for us to approach these things, because I'm thinking, this man is so old, I need to still maintain my respect. But you're like, but what he's saying doesn't really make sense. If you could just really take the time and be like, you know what, like this is what I do with the Muslim religion. Whatever anyone might say, that is, I feel is good from the Christian perspective. I listen to them and they will say whatever they say. After that, I'll always try to have a counter argument from a Muslim scholar to be like, what is your point on this thing? And you realize they're still able to respond back to that thing. Then when after I've had those both response, then I can only be able to make my final opinion or my final decision on that. But to only take one side and never inquire with the qualified and right professional people, that's a really poor approach into things, and that's where you'll end up. Tina Tina will be making debunking videos and reaction videos.
Yeah, he's giving us content.
Yeah.
But you know what, Chris, I want to touch on for me it's really, it's not even like for us to make the case. I've got an issue with the way that he conceives things and the way that he draws conclusions.
Yeah.
You see, he says there's no census, that, like the census mentioned in the book of Luke, talking about it was in the entire empire, there was a census that was said to have been done. And so he says he can't find the census, and therefore Jesus didn't exist. And he says from the same empire, we can't find information about the census. But what about information about Jesus Christ from Roman historians? Did he have a look at any? Because there might not be no census, there might be no information about a census, but the Roman historians wrote about Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Even the Jewish historians, the likes of Josephus, wrote about Jesus Christ and did mention that the brother of Jesus Christ died as well. And that tells you that they do acknowledge the historical figure of Jesus Christ. And the odd thing is that people within the early centuries never had a problem with the historical figure of Jesus Christ because they knew that he existed. It's only us who are coming within the 20th, 19th century and the latest.
2,000 years later.
Imagine. And worst part, when you look at Tacitus, of which he was the greatest Roman historian, this man was one of the high officers as well, and he had access to the archives of the Romans.
Absolutely.
And he states to us to say that there was a Christ who was killed under the governing of Pontius Pilate, who was ruling in Judea. He's telling us who was ruling. He's telling us what happened. He's telling us even how he died and everything. And this man tells you he has access to the archives and whatever the information that is needed. So
how can he say there's no information in the Roman Empire about Jesus? That's what I'm saying, that if you go there not looking to find anything, you won't find anything.
Definitely. You'll excuse
also going back to Josephus, because I think you've already touched on that. And I think it's important for them to know that you don't have to be a Christian to believe that Jesus was a historical person. Muslims believe Jesus is historical. Even the Jews that came a couple of years after Jesus Christ, they still write about him as a historical, person. In the Jewish Talmud, you can look at it. Jesus is mentioned there. They're not saying he's God, of course. They're not agreeing that he's a Messiah, but they're still saying there was a person that lived that was Jesus Christ. They agree. Even the Jews today, in their history classes, they write about Jesus. They write about Saul of Tarsus. And they write about them as historical people. So you don't necessarily have to be a Christian. I think people are quick to sort of make that conclusion to say, well, I don't believe, in Christianity, therefore Jesus didn't exist. I mean, even today, historians, that's not how they do history. Today, there are historians who affirm that Jesus was a historical person. But at the same time, they're not Christian. They can say, this is true, that's not true. There are some parts in the Gospels that they can say this is historical, but there are parts where they don't think it's historical. So people need to remove, that all or nothing. It's like it must be Jesus is real or he didn't exist. You can still say I'm not a Christian, but I do think there was somebody who was Jesus, and that's what Jay Israel was asking him: is Jesus a historical person?
Yeah, and I think we need to remove this stereotype of thinking that Christianity is a white man's religion, of which he did mention it somewhere within the video. If you can approach it with that mentality, you are destroying. You are just not even destroying. You are utitima the true knowledge of whatever or the wisdom that might be there, because already you are putting yourself in a certain point of perspective, and you won't be able to see anything, because then you'll be approaching this thing out of hate, out of whatever the thing that you think white people have done. Christianity is not a white man's religion. Christianity began within the Jewish concept of people, and they spread it around to the ends of the world, even before it could reach the western side of the nation. It was there in Africa. People had it in the northern part of Africa. So this thing out, Christianity is a white man's religion. I think if we can deal with it, it will help a lot of people to be able to be open-minded and be able to see things in every way. So you've said it very well. So I think we can continue. I see there's Chantel here on the comment says Njani, although I don't know Njani from what.
Must we show that comment on the live screen? There she is.
Yeah. I mean, if
Shout out to Chantel.
Yeah, prior to what, and we'll be able to respond back to that. I don't understand the context of your question as well. So we've touched on a lot of things. So Njani AP, so then we'll take it from there.
I just want to touch Chris on the census, because I think, people can assume that there was no census, but Josephus actually writes about a census. And
sure.
the issue there with the census for scholars is not so much that there was no census, but it's actually the timing of it. So obviously Luke says the census happened after the birth of Jesus, and Josephus puts it a little bit later, I think I'd say 10 years later. But scholars do agree these days that Josephus, even though he's accurate in his information, but sometimes he can date things like not accurately. And so really it's more about the accuracy, or do you take Luke's date, or do you take the date of Josephus? And there's even a case, there's documents, I think it's the Papyrus of London. I think it's Papyrus 904. And it explains how the census was taken in Egypt. And it tells us there that when they took that census, people would have to go back to their hometowns in order for the census to be done. The exact same way that Luke is describing it. So there's a case, for something very similar happening in Egypt. And so it's very plausible that actually it happened, because the way that Luke describes the census is exactly the same that that is found in the Egyptian papyrus and so on. So for me, the evidence is there. It's the issue of the dating. And then secondly, there is a possible similarity between those two. And for me, if you want to say the census never happened, you've got to produce evidence that says, no, the Roman Empire never conducted a census. But there's evidence that they did do it. And the way that they did it is very similar to the way that's described. And so, it happens that, documents can go missing, or, Rome gets conquered and documents are burnt, or so there's possible scenarios, but you can't just say if it's not there, therefore Jesus doesn't exist,
Please. We can continue.
Okay, let's continue.
Put together. The word alone, which is 66 book called Canyon Scriptures. And remember, I'm a theologian too. I studied, as you heard my story. I have taught the Bible. I have raised the pastor. Even in this city, some of the very strong churches are my son. Those sons, if you get to them, to their house, you'll see you are in this church. The point is, all these things, when I put them together, I felt I'm a husband, I'm a father. I cannot put my son into a place whereby when they question me or they look at me as a fool. Let me take another story. How did Judah die? Did he die by committing suicide, or he stumbled and fall on the stone and he hit his head and busted out his intestines? Which one is true? Acts 1:18. He took the money by the field, and while he was going, he hit himself on the stone.
Yes.
Imagine hitting a head and busting out your stomach. What that has to do? Confusion for me. Should I lead my children to confusion? Should I teach the book that confuses itself? But go to Matthew 27 verse 4. Says Judah was guilty, moved by guilt,
Committed.
took the money and throw it to the priest. And the priest he said, I have sinned, I killed a man. I shouldn't have done this. And the priest, they said, instead of saying, oh, holy son, repent, we're there for you, God will forgive you. They say, that's your story. He left the temple. He went straight.
What's a plenteologist?
Whatever. He killed himself.
Come again?
Take that case to court. How the judge is going to make up?
No, I just saw that his title is Plentyologist. What is a plentyologist?
I have no
Did you
idea.
see that?
uh-uh.
No, it's fine. I'll bring it back later.
I think let's just comment on this one.
I think that was the end of it anyway. Okay.
Yeah. Just give
Anything
your
on Judas?
okay. On Judas as well. This is not a Bible contradiction. And I think in the meantime, you can read what Chantel is saying, and then we'll be able to address whatever her comment is. Okay, I was reading.
So she was reacting.
How to the speaker to stand up for himself and his evidence, and then another for Christianity. We have both touched on this. You guys are doing awesome. Oh, thank you very much. Okay, I thought you were against
I think
us.
she's just commenting on the fact that I said for himself to establish that, God is real and so on. So what he does is he says, hey, I've got this evidence because, I made water and people drank that water and they were
Sure.
healed and so on. But for when it comes to Christianity, I want multiple sources, So I think she was basically just commenting on that. But also just want to establish, it's a very good question asked by Uche Israel is, can we prove the existence of God? I thought that was a very good question. But for me, praying for water or people being healed by your water, it doesn't prove that God is real. It doesn't even prove that God sent you, because the Bible tells us sometimes the devil hides himself like an angel of light. Even when the Antichrist comes, the Bible tells us that he will perform many miracles that will deceive people. So, that can also be a case for you being, an apostle of the devil. So, you still have to prove to us why you think God sent you. And miracles are not necessarily enough to prove that, you're sent by God or, your God is real.
Absolutely. That was a poor response, actually, about the existence of God. It still doesn't stand in the court because he likes to make example about the judge.
Yeah.
It could be hallucination. So and cut it off. But coming back to the last concept of contradiction that he's speaking on, to say that the Bible is contradicting itself prior to the death of Judas, and I think that is still not a contradiction. Because when you look at the concept of how it is done, is that with the Gospel of Luke, which is from Luke chapter 27, from verse 3 to 5, Luke, it tells us how Judas died. But when you look at the book of Acts, it tells us about the effects of that death. And people just look at, is it falling headlong? It is not necessarily saying you need to fall in the manner of your head like that, When you look at the definition of falling headlong, it comes in various types of definition. Sometimes even falling recklessly and not being able to maintain control, that is falling headlong, So this is a combination of one telling us on the type of death and the other one telling us on the effects of death. And it does say that Judas threw the money. Yes, he did throw the money, but even when you go in further more, it says that the land was purchased by Judas. On the other gospel, it says the priests, or they purchased the land. But when you look at the Greek writings over that, you are able to understand that it is both on the formality to say that the priests were able to buy the land in the name of Judas, because they didn't want the blood of the sinner to be upon their life.
To be on them. Yeah, they're still putting it back on him.
Even though yes, they did the purchase, but it was for him still at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
So Matthew describes to us the death of dying by hanging. And when you look at it, sometimes it's not as literal, because when you look at the book of when they're talking about David, you realize actually there was a guy called who was he? Ahithophel, I forgot his name. I'm not familiar with him. And it describes a death of a sinner. Sometimes it's not necessarily saying that that's a literal type of death that he died about. It's like us when we say motoragile or lepai. In English, that literally translates you have kicked the shits. I believe so. But in my language, when we translate that means the person has died. So in some instances, we see that this translation of saying that he died by a hanging, the concept of translation here is on the part to say that it's a type of death that was given to someone who has done so muchly wrong, and it's a concept of death that is given to them. So to say that this is a Bible contradiction, for me, it still doesn't stand as well, because when we go back and understand the concept of the Greek manner or the Greek ways that were spoken behind here, you realize these are completely different things compared to what we are saying. So they're not saying two different things. Matthew is talking about the type of death, and then but on the book of Acts is talking about the effect of the death. So I don't know what is your
I think that's good, man, because I think also when you are trying to interpret the Bible, as Chris has demonstrated, the language is important when it comes to interpretation. There are things that you can't interpret, the same way that you would interpret it in your own language. Second, the cultural context. What is the culture? And then, the third thing, look at the dates as well. When was this thing written, and all these accounts? And I think that will help you better understand what you might perceive as contradiction is not necessarily always what is contradiction. But I'm always interested in the logic, of a person. When he says if there's contradiction, therefore something it will be thrown out in court. First of all, the contradiction, let's say there are contradictions. For me, the contradictions, first of all, prove or disprove the notion that white people made it. Because when you make something up, if you're making it up by yourself, there shouldn't be contradiction. Why are these different stories? Because you would just make up one thing. And so the second thing is, I don't think that in court they use that logic. And historians also don't use that logic. If there's multiple attestation of something, it generally means that something is true. So for an example, if you take away all the Gospels, you still have the books of Paul, the epistles. And according to historians, the books of Paul actually come before the epistles. And they're saying Jesus is a Jewish Messiah. He died. He rose again. Same thing that is said by the Gospels. And you have to understand that the Bible, all these books, didn't just come as books that are together. These are independent books written by separate people, but they're all saying the same thing, right? Granted, let's say there's contradiction, but there's still the main message that is the same. And that's even a bigger miracle, to say that these people wrote these things independently, but then there's still a main message, the fundamentals, the things that we believe. Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. He died, he rose again, he ascended. All of that is there. And he doesn't comment on that, to say, well, there's agreement on that, then embrace the agreement. He's not going to say that, because I'll give you a simple example. If you're a teacher in school, you took your classroom and, you put them inside the class and you break a glass, but you do a couple of actions before you break the glass. And then you ask each student individually what happened. The way that they describe the event, there'll definitely be variations in the story, right? The minor variations, but the main storyline will be carried out throughout, from all the people. They'll say the glass was broken. That's the main story. The glass was broken. What the teacher did before and all that stuff, it might vary, but the glass was broken. And so that's fundamentally, when it comes to the gospel, even if you think it's contradiction, but there's still a main message that runs through these different people. And I don't think if you took this to a judge, they'll throw it out. It's like the story of Usenzo Meiwa, You think if these people have stories that are varying, they're going to say, well, case is closed. No, they're going to see what is common. What is the multiple attestation from the witnesses and so on.
And even just to touch up on that part, we today, because of we have a different concept of culture, we think that everything needs to be documented, and you realize not to its entirety. As long as you can have, because what they were using there back in the days, in the ancient days, is they were using witnesses as to provide proof. If someone says they saw it, that is valid for them. So to dismantle and reject whatever other people are saying that what they saw, that was the concept of what was used as a source of proving whatever thing might be. Even today, that principle is still used. Who witnessed the death? Who witnessed him, who witnessed the birth, who witnessed that. And you realize that there were people who came and said we had witnessed whatever the thing it might be. So we also need to look at those things, and whenever we are approaching things to disprove them, always look at them from a multifaceted approach, and you'll be able to get a clear understanding of things. Understand the context, understand the culture, and cultures are different from our culture today. Like today, if you tell me 10 o'clock, it needs to be 10 o'clock in the morning or in the evening, you know, and we write it as 10, 10, we know that it's in the morning, and when we write it as 22, we know that it's in the evening. But you realize back in the times, they were using a different concept of identifying time. So we need to understand culture, we need to understand context when we are approaching things. That are ancient, and know that you know sometimes with our logic of us today, some things are not applicable.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Chris. I think that, you know, we're living in a time where everything is anti-Christian. And I think that people you know, are ready to find something negative about Christianity, but they're not really doing proper, you know, objective research. And I think this is why this channel is important, because you're going to hear both sides of the story. Like, we've played you the one side of the story, and then we give you the Christian side, or the Christian perspective. And the beautiful thing about this is that we're not even drawing most of this information, you know, from ourselves. They are actually early church fathers that have written about Jesus, that have even responded to these questions that are being asked today. And they're African church fathers, you know, people like Tertullian in Alexandria, Athanasius. Look up all these people, because I'm convinced that you can actually reconstruct the New Testament from just reading the early church fathers quoting the New Testament. And even the story of Jesus, you can take away the Bible and go to the early church, and you can still see them referencing this book called the Bible. You can still see them talking about this person called Jesus. And then you go to the Roman historians. You know, you can find people like Tacitus. Go and look him up. He writes about Jesus in the 1st century. You know, Pliny the Young, he also writes about Jesus. And even Jewish historians like Josephus, and even you know, the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, will tell you that there was a historical person that lived, that was Jesus Christ. Now, here's the fascinating thing. For the first 1,000 years of church history, not a single person writes about Jesus not being a historical person. In fact, it's something that is modern. It's like a modern invention in the 19th century. But the people closest to Jesus Christ, they wrote about him being a historical person. And now you're free to choose, obviously, to whether you believe Jesus is divine or not. But the question that we're dealing with here, was Jesus a historical person? Did he exist? Chris, you were cut off there, and I jumped in. But just finish what you were saying.
I even forgot. But I think I was speaking about having common sense, something in those lines.
Having common sense.
It's in my mind, yeah. Now,
I suppose that's a good way to end the whole thing. Have common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, just when they're approaching historical things, they need to understand the context, the culture, and the times, and how people were dealing with things by then, and just have common sense when you're dealing with Christian things. Don't leave it endlini or leave it behind the door or something like that. It's well much required. When you see such things and you are unable to explain them, understand that there were words that were translated and even transliterated from one culture to another. So you need to understand what was the original word saying in this concept. Sometimes we just read a thing and we just want to run with it and be like, yeah, this is the end, and you only realize the context behind it. You know, that's why you tend to hear pastors, they'll normally, when they're preaching, they will say, in the Hebrew, this word means 1, 2, 3, because they're trying to give you a broader context and behind this thing, you know. So we need to really be cautious over these things. But I think because of having social media, we are just quick to try to be famous for whatever the thing it is, while as we realize we haven't done much work. And I think we still, this is the second person in South Africa that I need to question his theological state as a scholar, of which he did state that he's a theologian. And so if you're a theologian and you've never regarded all the evidence that has been provided, even outside the Bible, besides the Bible by itself, outside the Bible that has been provided, the likes of Tacitus, the likes of Josephus, if you haven't considered all this evidence that has been provided outside of Christianity to prove the historical figure of Jesus Christ, then I think unenkinga. So just make yourself a favor and just go and study, know more and research before you can come out in the public and where you'll be giving us a concept of to make a content about weather. So yeah, no, back to you, sir.
No, I think for me, the most beautiful thing about Jesus, and Somnala says, you know, for you to be proven as a historical, you got to write about yourself, you know. And I think the beautiful thing about Jesus is he never wrote anything. Yeah. But the people who saw him started writing. And there's no person in history who's been written about more than Jesus Christ. There's no person in history who's been sung about more than Jesus Christ. There's no person in history who's been painted, you know. He's the most famous, the most influential person to ever live. He never even wrote anything, you know, and it just shows you that there must be something that happened in the first century actually that made people start to write about him, that made them to start to write, you know, these gospels, to write these letters. And the early church fathers, you mentioned that there were 5,000 manuscripts. Think about this. Manuscripts means, you know, you've got a book, and this book gets copied, and it gets copied to different languages. You know, there's languages like Syriac. You know, you've got the languages in Egypt, the Coptic. You know, you've got Greek, you've got Hebrew. Every language in the world. Why are they copying this book? You know, if this book is just contradiction, makes no sense. Why is it copied 5,000 times? You're talking about the Greek manuscripts. But there's actually 20,000 if you combine all the other languages in the early church, you know, Syriac, Coptic, and so on. Why are they copying this book? You know, if it's just a man-made book, why are they still writing about it? Even today, people are still rushing to go Bibles. Why? It's a timeless book. And for me, it just speaks to, you know, the truthfulness of Jesus Christ, that there's something that's truthful that is inside those gospels, and people just can't help but want to read about these books. So I don't know if you want to just close us off.
Nah, very much. You said it well, very well, profound on that. And no, I think we've addressed a lot. We've addressed a lot over here. Looking at the sake of time as well, we don't want to prolong it and go.
Let's hold it there.
No, but thank you very much, my brother. You have settled it. You have said it.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for your contribution as well. Very clear.
Everyone, thank you for your comments. Thank you, Shoni M. We appreciate you, my good sir. And
shout out to Shoni M.
Catch us live as well next week, and we'll be doing the same thing. Probably we'll find a different video. And if you do have any video that you'd like for us to go through, you can send it. And then
tag us on it.
Absolutely, we'll be able to go.
So next week, Wednesday, is going to be exciting. We've got our brother Ebenezer Afolabi from Nigeria. I call him the father of Christian apologetics in our continent, because he's the first person who started writing about these things. And so we're excited to be hosting him on the live. And he's going to be bringing his audience from Nigeria as well. So it's part of what we're doing, is we're uniting and awakening the church to respond to the apologetics challenges that are facing the church, answering the questions that are being asked by our generation. And we're doing all of this in love, you know, in the trust and in the power of the Holy Spirit. Because for me, what's exciting about all of this is everyone is talking about the Bible. Everyone is talking about Jesus Christ. It's an opportunity for us to really come in and bring the truth of the gospel to people who are already ready, who are already talking about it. So we're excited next week. Please make sure to subscribe so you can get notifications when we put things out. But next week we're going our brother coming through, and he's going to be focusing also on the historical Jesus. But he is an expert. He's brilliant, and we do celebrate him. So we look forward so much to what he's doing. So I hear, or I'm reading here, that a plentyologist is somebody who study it's a study of plenty, according to him. So it's somebody who focuses on basically it's prosperity. He's a specialist in prosperity.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. We'll see you on the next video.
Keep on.